So I will, no, quickly, I'd like to call us to order for the regular board meeting of Thursday, December 12th, 2019. This is our last board meeting of the calendar year. Yay! Yeah, no. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for being here today. And I would like to acknowledge that we are within the territory of the Shuswap First Nation. We have an amended agenda in front of us today. We added a few things from this morning noon meeting, and so may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? So moved, seconded. Any further additions? Yes, Director McMahon.
Under new business, I'd like to have a discussion of core business priorities.
Okay. So we'll make that number 11, core business priorities. Under new business? New business. New business. Okay, looking around to the directors, is there anything else that you'd like to add on? Okay. Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the amended agenda? Okay, thank you. So next up, we have our regular board meeting minutes of November 28th, 2019, Annex A, pages 1 to 11. May I have a motion to adopt, receive and adopt? So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Is there any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? I'm going to look over to Director Lee because I believe there was something that you wanted to pull out of there on page 9, number 7. Maybe. Just spitballing here. So.
Let me get down to that. I wasn't quite ready. I was doing my director's report here. Recommendation number 7, I'd like to pull that out.
So, if you can explain to pull that out, the reasoning, please.
I was working with staff, and we felt there was really no reason to solicit the feedback, that the information package we'd found was quite clear. So I'm going to look to staff, but I believe that the motion would be to rescind that particular recommendation. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, because staff have not yet acted upon it, we can, or the director could put forward a motion to rescind that particular resolution, and it would pass with a 2/3 majority vote.
All right, so looking over to Director Lee, is that the motion that you'd like to make?
Yes,
to rescind that recommendation?
To rescind recommendation number 7.
It is page 9, motion number 7, recommendation number 7. And so to read that out, that is that staff work with the director from Area A to solicit feedback from residents with respect to a library service in Eglinton/Pender Harbour. And so Director Lee has made that motion. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. And as our corporate officer said, we need a 2/3 majority to have this pass. Would anybody like to speak to this prior to calling the vote on that? Okay. Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of rescinding this motion? Okay, that was enough. A motion to rescind is carried. Okay. Is there any other business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? Seeing none, we'll move on to our presentations and delegations. And we have Rachel Yordy, and no, Rachel's not here, Nancy, and Cameron, and Dale, yes. Would you like to come forward with your presentation, please?
And you need chairs, too.
Yeah, please feel free to bring up chairs. Do you have a PowerPoint or just? No. Okay, wonderful. And just please make sure, Ian will show you the microphone. I'm sure Cam knows how to use it by now. Okay. There you go.
We recognize that Rachel couldn't be here, so we appreciate the fact that you're willing to take us 3. We don't know if the 3 of us have got the same ability that she does, so please bear with us and try to be concise. So, Nancy.
Okay,
So you have the letter, which is our proposal of what next steps we are proposing to take with the CIA Reconciliation Movement. And it's the community engagement exercises we want to do up and down the whole coast. We recognize that, she writes it, of course, Rachel writes it beautifully in the goals. It requires a change of heart and also knowledge and understanding and an opportunity to listen to one another. So we want to go to each community and invite the public to come and sit and in dialogue with us regarding the things that are important to them around reconciliation. What does it mean to them? What might be obstacles? Where they think things are right now and what needs to go forward. And we're kind of asking for some direction from the community as well as to future development of what we will do with CIA. So we are here. Do you want to speak?
No.
Okay, so we are here to ask for your support of this as we go forward. And we invite you to join us in the dialogue, to come to these, where the dates are all on here, where we're going to be. It's steep, we're going to go boom, 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 boom. We're going to go quickly to between January and March, and hopefully have a presentation for the entire community by the end of March 31st. And we're asking for you to come, and also if you could help us with venues where we can meet. The cost of venues where necessary, we're asking for that. We don't have, as you know us, so you know that we do everything from donations, and we keep trying for more and looking for more and getting more. People are pretty supportive, though it's very grassroots. It's not a big budget. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we have the governments involved with this. It lends a statement of credibility, and I think it shows that it's more meaningful. It's just not a handful of people in the community. It's our governments, our people that are the directors like yourselves that represent your communities. If you're supporting us, then the people behind you, if they're not supporting us, are probably going to have a second look.
And that second look is what's important, so that we have dialogue. That's what we want.
Okay, Director Seekers, please.
Thank you. I have a question. So I've been to a number of these events in the last while, as you know. What I'm noticing is the events keep the population separate. So there aren't typically a lot of the Shuswap Nation who attend the community events, and then there are separate events for the Shuswap Nation. If we're looking at reconciliation, when are we going to actually have sessions that have all people together?
We hope that will grow. The Shuswap Nation is going through a process of healing and needing to talk with one another about this. Reconciliation is not necessarily a pleasant word in the nation. It hurts people. We have a lot of raw experiences people are going through, and we're working very carefully, gently, and consistently alongside. We're not telling anyone what to do. We are just saying, can we stand together, walk side by side for those that are able to. And more people are coming out to both events. But we've been having lately focused events for the nation and for healing purposes. I don't know if that's helpful to you. It's very hard to explain. It's very...
Maybe.
It's very...
I understand.
Yeah, you understand?
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our hope. This is why it's called a movement.
It's also a case that we have to build trust. And that takes time and takes effort, and it takes working together to do that.
And if we're not in the same room, that's a little harder to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're trying doing everything we can to get people in the same room, as long as they're comfortable and feel safe. Do you want to say anything?
Certainly, I've been involved a lot with the 4 reading projects that we had, and we do see individuals coming from the Shuswap Nation who will engage individually, and as Nancy and Cam were both saying, it's an individual process, a journey to healing. And it takes each person their own time. And it's all about building relationship one by one. We did have a series at the library, at the Seashot Library, on the First Contact series, and in those dialogues. So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the First Contact. It was an APTN series that they put on. They had 6 people, 3 men, 3 women across Canada, and they spent 28 days going to First Nations communities across Canada. And it was 3 different episodes, and it was watching how they evolved, or didn't, over that time. So we showed those at the library 3 different evenings, and we did have both people from the nation and non-Native people there to sit and dialogue together. And those were really, really interesting discussions for sure. And we have had other opportunities with some of the films that we've put on, where we've had, maybe not a huge number of the band members, but some band members coming. And it's certainly, it's growing slowly. And we are very cognizant of the fact that there's so much for us to learn, and there's a lot of emotion. Yeah.
And another point is that, what's the population, Keith, 1,800 on the Seashell Nation? What was it, 1,400? And what's the population of the Sunshine Coast? So if you looked at it that way, a lot of people from the nation come out to our events. I just want to say, I have to say that quite often. People are like, oh, I didn't realize, yeah. And that's man, woman, child, elders and babies, right? Yeah. 700 on the coast.
Director McMahon?
Yeah, I'm assuming the dates here are a window in which you are going to do these sessions, so you haven't actually pinned down the particular dates. I see you're coming to the Gibsons Public Library, which is great. They have had a couple of events with the Squamish Nation, so were you intending to invite the Squamish?
We always search out Squamish Nation members, and there are a few that live in Gibsons. And I always ask them personally if they would like to come. And usually we have had, almost every event, we've had someone from the nation come.
Dr. Seekers? Thank you. I notice you've identified locations for some of these.
Yeah.
I don't really know what the process is at the regional district for, do we have a process? Can we actually provide space? And if so, how do we do that?
We'll go over to staff for that.
Yeah, so from the perspective, of course, being a regional district is a little more, there's a little more of a process. So typically what would happen if a organization was wanting to get some support for these types of things, typically we don't donate space. That's kind of a challenge, but so we'd have to look at how we could facilitate these kinds of things, because if it's a board initiative, or if it's a community initiative, we would have to delineate that, because of course we could accommodate it within our own budgets, but if we're providing essentially financial consideration to a community group, then we would have to figure out how to do that. But
I have Director Lee and then Director Ties.
Would constituency expense be? Oh, sorry.
And then Director Ties.
Go ahead. Stop wondering.
I'd like to start by saying I'm extremely supportive of this. And we will find you a venue one way or the other. So Pender Harbor's in. And I would guess we could probably do some grant and aid if we had to. Would that be appropriate, Tina?
so the nuance is we can't grant and aid a service, like we can't
fund grant and aid to a service that's already established. So if, say, the Pender Harbor was at the Pender Harbor Community Association, that's not a regional district facility, arm's length, absolutely. If the Reconciliation Movement wanted to put sort of a grant and aid through for support for this initiative, then most certainly that could be entertained as well. How they use the funds, whether or not it's to, purchase facility, et cetera, that would be part of how we could work with them on what that would look like.
Director Ties.
My apologies. Constituency expense, is that a possibility to use the director's discretion when there are expense claims?
Well, typically constituency expenses for the running of the office, so it really depends on whether or not, would that fit within that framework? I think it'd be a little bit of a stretch, but.
Director Seekers?
In grant and aid, can they request in kind rather than money? So a night at Roberts Creek Community Hall, an evening or a day or whatever at the Gibson's Public Library.
So regardless if it's in kind, that's
Yeah.
just a non-cash transaction.
Right.
So there's still a financial consideration that would have to be done. So,
But grant and aid.
Yeah, I think so. I think we could look. So maybe because there's sort of a list of venues here, a lot of these venues are not regional districts, so staff could work with the Reconciliation Movement to see what in particular would work with them, and then we could bring forward sort of a recommendation for the board's consideration.
And within some of these communities with the joint use agreement with the school district, is that a possibility in utilizing that?
That particular agreement is not for third parties. It's for regional district and school use.
So, but they could,
I think we could look at it like you're partnering with us, and we're partnering with you for the good of the community. We look at you as partners in what we're doing.
Director Seekers?
We're totally there. Our issue is the funding of it, and that every one of the functions gets funded by different people.
Yeah.
So we're looking at how do we make that work inside of that. So it might be a grant and aid application for the various facilities.
So perhaps we should speak directly with
Tina. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just see what can be worked out?
Yeah.
Okay. There was one other thing, and that was, we did the Kairos blanket exercise here this year, earlier, and with a number of people from the board and staff, and I just want to remind you that we're available for others if we want to do it again, and I've got some pamphlets on it. I can just leave a few with the staff perhaps, or whatever, just to say we can do that as well, because it's a really good exercise of learning awareness.
And each time you do the blanket exercise, you get a little bit, something different out of it.
Every time.
And I'm wondering if I know that you were working on the Sea Shop Nation specific blanket exercise.
We did that with them.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
great.
We keep going, we keep doing them, it's just incredible.
We haven't had that, we had the general.
Oh, right,
Yeah,
that was supposed to be done in the spring. No, this is what we're doing first.
Okay,
This proposal dialogue first.
okay.
And yeah, but at the same time, we're still offering the blanket exercise to the greater community.
Okay.
What Lori's asking is there information about the Sea Shop Nation, because this is where we live.
Yeah, and I wish I could say there's going to be there's bits and pieces that we're slowly adding in. It has to be approved.
Okay.
All the information has to be,
It's
Yeah.
coming.
Okay. I have Director Lee next.
I'd like to make a motion that staff work with the Reconciliation Group and bring back recommendations on how we can fund the appropriate venue. Is that the kind of, would you need that? Is that what you need? Yes?
Do I have a second for that? Seconded? Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Any further comments? Director Tice, did you have your hand up? Different motion, okay. All right, so no more comments on this motion. I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Director Tice?
Yeah, just wondering if we need a motion that the respective directors are willing to be available for those dates suggested, or how, or whether we just leave that with them and so that they contact, it says here that we're going to be contacted individually as anyway, so. Okay.
If we need I don't think we need a motion for that, but just know this is incredibly important work, and we believe very strongly in it as well as a board, and would certainly please connect with us regarding each one within our community. And Director Hiltz?
Yeah, thanks. And how soon do you think you're going to narrow the date downs for like Gibson's, where the venue's kind of already established? You've got,
Well, we should have, in January, we should know.
by early January?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Okay, Director Lee?
If you need anything in the Pender Harbor area, just contact me and I'll make sure it happens for you.
Okay, thank you.
Or to either side of the table for,
Any further questions, or is there, what?
I turned my mic off. I don't know, gremlins, I tell you, there's gremlins in the boardroom. And they're not just sitting behind the table. I want to thank you so much for coming and bringing this to us, and for the work that you are doing. It's so incredibly important to our community. Directors, any other questions? The delegation, do you have any other comments?
No, we'd like to thank you for your support. It's just tremendous. And we think it's important and needed to make a statement to the community, and you've always been there for us, so thank you.
And I should have said from the beginning that Chief Gary Feschuk would be here, but he is not able to be here today. He sends his regrets. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, that support, right? You're appearing in here, but are you looking for a piece of paper?
No, Mark, we're looking for your involvement as much as you're able to at the upcoming, we call them workshops.
Director McMahon?
Just going to make a small observation, that is that when you schedule an event, say at the library, you have to have people come to you. But it might be worth looking at going around to some of the community associations, because the people are already there, and they are already people who are involved in the community and are somewhat political.
Yeah.
So just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The button and see if you can turn that off.
Wow, that works. It's nice. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much again. Okay, so we are going to continue on through our agenda package. I'm going to ask for a motion to receive all of our reports first, please. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Then we'll move through these block by block. We're going to start with report number 4 on the agenda package, which is Annex C, pages 14 to 17 of your package. And this is the Corporate and Administrative Services Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 3, 5 to 6, 8 to 11 of November 28th, 2019. Before we adopt those as a block, are there any of those recommendations that you would like to pull out? Like Director Lee, number 8?
Yes, I would like to have that withdrawn. I think is that the right thing?
Just pull it out.
Pull it out?
Just pull it out, and we can discuss it separately.
Okay. pull her
Okay,
out.
so we're pulling out number 8. Are there any of the other recommendations that any of the directors would like to pull out before we adopt these as a block? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt all of those recommendations with the exception of number 8, please. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Now, Director Lee, number 8, did you wish to speak to why you'd like this one pulled out and what you'd like to do with it?
We already have a service area. I don't think it's necessary to make another one.
Okay, so from a process perspective, because this is a recommendation that's come from a committee to the board, so to our corporate officer, do you wish, I guess the best thing to do would be to have a motion to...
We could, dispose of it without debate, we could move objection to consideration of the question.
Okay, what was the second one again?
So we could move objection to consideration of the question, and that would dispose of it. If the board wishes to debate, they may debate it, and then they may, subsequent to that, postpone the motion indefinitely.
So I'm going to go to Director McMahon because she had her hand up right away.
I like that one. I move objection.
Okay.
Whatever that is.
Okay, and is there a second? That's a second. Is there any further conversation? That's the first time I've actually heard that one. That's awesome. That's great. I want your copy of Robert's Rules. Is there any conversation on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the, is everybody clear that we're just,
I know we're doing, but I have no idea what it is we're doing.
Okay.
What the wording is.
What the wording is? Well,
She's got it.
she's got it? Okay. I will call the question. All those in favor of disposing? Okay. That carries. That's awesome. Okay, great.
Read it in the minute.
We'll read it in the minutes. Next up on our agenda is number 5, the Special Infrastructure Services Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 3 of December 3rd, 2019, Annex D, pages 18 to 19 of your package. Directors, would you like to pull out any one of those recommendations before we adopt them as a block? Seeing no one moving to move anything, I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt those recommendations. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, so we have 5A from earlier this morning, or this morning afternoon, which is the Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations, numbers 2 to 3, 10 to 12, 15 and 16 of earlier today, pages 19A and to C of your package. Directors, would you like to pull out any of those to debate separately before we move them as a block? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adopt those recommendations, please. So moved, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, number 6 in our package is from our corporate officer. It's the 2020 board appointments, Annex E, pages 20 to 22 of the package. And I'm going to look to our corporate officer for any conversation on this.
Thank you, Chair. The list of director liaison appointments are reviewed annually, and so they have been provided here for the board's consideration in the attachment A to this report.
Okay, so I'm going to look to the directors and see if you want to move the recommendations that it be reviewed and adopted by the board, or if everybody is happy with the appointments as they are, or if there's any changes that you'd like to make. Okay, I'm going to go to Director Lee and then Director McMahon.
I'd like to say appointing me to the Sunshine Coast Seniors Planning Table is very appropriate.
Excellent. Okay, and Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'm fine with the appointments, but at some time, I wouldn't mind getting a bit more information about a few of these. It's not clear to me how many of these are actually meeting. For instance, the Joint Watershed Management Advisory Committee, when did that last meet? And also wondering how often the Aboriginal Metro Vancouver Aboriginal Relations Committee, and has that been meeting a lot? Just curious.
Director Tice, go ahead.
Yeah, Aboriginal Relations Committee does meet regularly. Unfortunately, it's always on a Thursday, so I can only make, one out of every 4 meetings or so, because it just, the way it works timing-wise, because I'd either be here or there, so I'd rather be here.
And we thank you for joining us here. I'm going to look over to maybe GM Rosenboom about the Joint Watershed Management Advisory Committee, because I'm assuming that's under your purview, or you would be the staff liaison for that. How often do they meet?
Thank you, Chair. The committee hasn't met for several years. I just made a note that I will address it as part of the water governance report that's coming forward in January as well. More information to come. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you very much. Any other questions on any of the committees or appointments? Yes, Director McMahon.
What about Heritage Protocol Committee? Like, what sort of things would require a meeting of the Heritage Protocol Committee?
I gotta look over to staff and probably GM Hall, maybe?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff don't recall any recent meetings of that committee, but there are frequent staff-to-staff contacts that touch on the Heritage Protocol Agreement, and so staff aren't aware of any pressing issues that would lead to a meeting. Thanks.
Director Hiltz.
Follow-up, so there is this protocol agreement, could that be provided to the board at some point? Or is it in our stuff that's already in our sync folders, or?
Thank you for the question, Chair. If it isn't already in your folders, and I'm not sure if it is, staff can certainly provide it or provide a reference link to make it easy to find. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Probably the same for the Watershed Management Advisory Committee, in terms of reference, maybe the last minutes of the meeting when it was held. I remember attending it, I don't remember what we talked about. It's a long time ago.
Okay. All right, looking to the directors for any other questions. Director McMahon?
And how about the Youth Awareness Committee that Director Tice is on?
The Youth Action Awareness Committee, YAC. Well, it used to meet fairly regularly. I'm not, I'm going to look. You've received, yes, Director Seegers.
I haven't made any of the meetings, but we have somebody there who goes to those meetings, and I get regular minutes. So they are meeting regularly.
Director Tice.
To be honest, I forgot I was on it, but I do get the minutes. I forgot I was designated, so maybe I should show up one of these days.
Yes, if you could share the minutes as well, that's great.
I can.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Director Hiltz?
Sharing of minutes, would they come before a standing committee then, or no?
Just email or through the board correspondence file, so it can just be shared with either Tracy or...
I'm wondering about the public side, does the public have a chance to see these? Does Sechelt receive them and the public has a chance, or is it...
Well, I can tell you from, because the committee, well, I have too much history sometimes. The committee was originally started a number of years ago by a now ex-school board trustee, and was supported through that, and in conjunction, and so it's a long-standing committee. The YAC minutes are public. They can be, because I know they're shared through the school district as well. So, I mean, we can certainly, we'd have to confirm what the terms of reference are, but there's typically nothing of significant confidentiality within the minutes, because it's very, so Director Seegers?
In Sechelt, the liaison actually reports on it as part of their council report. Verbal, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
I will move the appointments as outlined in the attachment.
Okay, so that the following list of board appointments be adopted by the board? Okay, so we have that moved, seconded, okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Moving on, number 7, from the corporate officer, 2020 resolutions to AVICC, Annex F, pages 23 to 25 of our package. Over to you, corporate officer, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the deadline for submission of resolutions to the AVICC is February 6th, and they would need to be adopted by the January 23rd board meeting. So staff are just seeking direction in terms of what topics you would like to see resolutions drafted on. And it would also be helpful when you do identify topics, if you could also give us an indication of the problem or the issue that you're seeking to resolve.
I know there's been one, maybe, that Director Ties would like to be brought forward. And I think there's probably a couple of other ones as well, so go ahead.
I thought we were going to discuss them during the January meeting, so I just brought it forward for consideration, and I think I shared it with staff. Do we need to discuss it at this point in time, or?
We don't need to discuss it, just as long as we'll make sure that the corporate officer gets that. That particular one is regarding business licensing in regional districts.
Yep.
Director Seegers?
I think what staff are looking for here is if we give them the heads up now, they would put the resolution together that would go forward to AVICC. So they need some idea as to topic and, background around that, because then they can do the research. Has it already been dealt with at AVICC and UBCM, or is it something new? So that they can come and be prepared for the meeting on the 23rd in time for the February 6th deadline, or February whatever deadline, right?
Okay.
And then
Yes.
I have a question about one of these that's on here, recommendation 7, on the top of page 24.
Okay,
So
go
this
ahead.
is, so that staff in cooperation with municipalities and RCMP investigate the immediate and midterm potential storage facility site and disposal options for abandoned RV campers, vehicles the RCMP requires be towed. We have one right now that's sitting in a lot that's been towed and needs to be disposed of, and we don't know how to do that. And the RCMP are basically paying all the fees right now.
Okay.
So, we're looking to staff to figure out, what do we do?
Do we, Canadian Navy? I don't know. I'll look to staff to see if there's,
Sorry. So is the question about, do we want an AVICC resolution on this issue, or is the
It's
question
both.
about actual, okay.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have, I got a call one time, a text actually, from Staff Sergeant about an RV that was on a street, in a dark street, blocking the road, and it needed to be towed. And this one is the one that was burnt on the highway. Doesn't belong to anybody. They had to get it off. So they found somebody to tow it. Now what do they do with it? Right, and we've got a number of those up and down the coast. Lots, I know that, there's a bunch up in Pender too, just being parked places. How do we deal with those? Yeah.
we're still,
Thank you, Chair. I think that this recommendation has gone forward to staff for action, and I'm not actually sure where the first part of that recommendation is at. But further to that, if there is something that we should be bringing forward to AVICC around how local governments deal with this, then we're prepared to draft something for that.
yeah. Director Hiltz?
Yeah, I would like to move that recommendation. There seems to be a high correlation between 8F roads and abandoned vehicles. Just as a note, that's kind of what's happening in my neighborhood, so there is a MOTI component to that, and the unimproved right-of-way, and and who does it belong to, and that ownership issue. So there does seem to be if you want to dispose of a vehicle, go to an 8F. Oops, I shouldn't have said that to the public.
Yeah, well, yeah. I've got Director Lee and then Director McMahon.
I'm not sure how the resolution to AVIC should work, but I think we need to get the province to put a process together for us and make sure the funding is in place, because sometimes it's Modi, sometimes it's abandoned in Crown land, up the back roads, and it ends up being our problem when it's not. It's parked in their property. They should have a process to take care of that when we identify it, and they should pay for it. So I think we need a motion to address that, and province-wide, not just in our area. I'm sure it's everywhere.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, because I do think it could be a jurisdictional issue and we don't have the authority, so the resolution could be crafted in such a way that we present that challenge to the province and ask them to provide us a response on some potential options for how we would deal with that as a local government.
Good. Director McMahon? Yeah, I've got it. Yeah.
I support that. I wonder too if ICBC could somehow be handed the bill for this sort of thing. I'm sorry that I didn't really sit down and think about this in the last week because we've been a little preoccupied with other things. Two of the issues that are top of mind in my area right now are stormwater management and marine debris, particularly styrofoam. I mean, those are areas where we need help from senior government to deal with it, and the public has a lot of legitimate concerns. I'm not being more precise on that, but I would be interested to know what previous resolutions on those two topics have gone forward.
Okay, Director Hiltz?
I'm back to the abandoned vessels. Abandoned vessels, back to vehicles. There is a similarity. So we are talking provincial lands, right-of-ways and provincial crown lands. We're not talking private lands, right? So to kind of put some scope on that for staff. So.
And I do have an abandoned vessel right beside Trout Lake that's just recently appeared, and the motor's been taken off of it. And yeah, so yeah, it's a derelict. Okay, anything else that's popping up for anyone right now for AVICC? Because we will have a more opportunity to discuss this in January. Yes, Director Lee.
It's an observation, and that was that we had put that motion forward that turned into the very first one that they dealt with at the UBCM. And I don't know if they've actioned it, and if they haven't, we should put it forward again. I don't know the process, though, or the strategy.
I haven't seen a statement of resolutions from UBCM as of yet. I'll look to the corporate officer to see if that's come through.
So part of the research is looking at previous resolutions, and typically if the province has provided a response, that would be included, and I would bring that forward as well. Which resolution in particular were we referring to in this case?
That was the one about land use planning with First Nations.
The collaboration.
The collaboration piece. Director Cole?
I was just going to say I sort of liked where Director McMahon was going with ICBC. A lot of products today, electronics, batteries, tires, all have a recycle fee. And if in the licensing of a vehicle, ICBC to incorporate a disposal fee that if you do it responsibly, you get it back. If not, there is a budget within ICBC to deal with these vehicles. Whether that could be worked into some sort of presentation to be brought forward to AVICC or UCBM. It's just that it's a provincial problem. The province does the licensing. ICBC, if you're going to drive the vehicle or have the vehicle, they've got you. So it seems a natural funding mechanism.
Okay, Director Ties?
Yeah, Director McMahon just twigged me on an answer there, or a question there, and that's the changing the paradigm around transportation on a provincial scale, looking at going beyond the automobile and having a multimodal transportation network throughout the province that could be public, semi-public, ride-sharing, e-bikes, whatever it may be. So just shifting the paradigm away from especially in the rural areas, away from a solely car-based transportation network. So that's sort of calling out Modi on what they're currently willing and able to do.
Okay, Director McMahon?
Well, in fact, Modi just published an active transportation plan, the design guideline, which I read. The difficulty is the actual actioning of this. I myself would be very interested in Modi having a frank discussion with the public about their capacity and about managed retreat, because that is going to be a really big topic of discussion. And to my knowledge, Modi has not done any planning yet around climate change and sea level rise.
Okay.
But I'm not sure whether this is the time and place or not.
Okay, any other topics? Now, to our corporate officer, we've thrown a whole bunch of things out at you, topics. How would you like us to deal with that? Can we just simply provide just affirmation that the topics we've discussed, that you'll essentially bring them forward as AVICC resolutions to January 9th PCDC?
Thank you, Chair. If I may confirm
Yes.
them. Business licensing for regional districts, abandoned vehicles, stormwater management, marine debris. I have a question about the medical cannabis resolution, just to have a bit more context around the issue with that. And I did provide one that we had put forward in previous years. And that's on page 24.
Yes, and I think that that one would be with a little tweaking, because because when recreational cannabis was brought into legislation, they didn't really deal with the medical cannabis piece, and that's where we're really having a lot of problems in the rural areas, is around the medical cannabis and these large grow-ops within residential neighborhoods that essentially the RCMP have no jurisdiction. And it's creating between smell and power, water usage, and it's becoming a community safety issue. Director Seekers?
There are a few issues. One is nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows that they have a medical license, and there's no requirement to have odor control or anything. So it's almost, we almost want to have something like bring it into alignment with the municipal jurisdictional oversight or something. So building bylaw, so they have to make sure that the house is structurally, or the facility, whatever, is structurally set up for it. You don't have mold issues, you got power dealt with properly. There's all kinds of issues because we don't even know where they are. And when they get reported, the RCMP go there and they say, well, sorry, here's my license, and nobody can do anything. So how do we bring it into a place where safety is dealt with, right? Safety for them and for the community. And we deal with things like odor control and oversight.
Thank you.
Director Lee?
My favorite subject, yellow lines and bike lanes. I believe that the MODI is not adequately funding to paint the yellow lines in the rural areas, in the secondary roads. It's more of an accident if it gets done. And also, they're not building bike lanes on those secondary roads. I was wondering if we need some sort of a motion saying to start paying attention to the maintenance, or how could we make it clear we want them to do it by way of a motion and that they're not doing it. And the second one is, I'm just throw this out before I go back to the first one. I really hesitate to ask for more taxation because the government's always eager to do that. We were talking of end of life for the vehicles, but hey, maybe we can make it a Recycle BC thing.
Okay.
So back to my first one.
Okay.
Is there interest in trying to get a motion on the yellow lines and the bike lanes on secondary roads?
It's safety and more, safety and line painting on rural areas, or in rural areas?
They're both safety issues because people are traveling on those rural roads and they're walking on those rural roads. Mm-hmm. And the chances of them getting killed is just amazing that it don't happen.
Yeah.
And so the safety is really compromised on the roads. And what's happening in the rural areas in our areas, is that more and more people are taking to the roads because we're encouraging them, but we haven't got safe infrastructure for them to use.
Okay. Is that sufficient, Corporate Officer, with that one? Okay, I have Director McMahon, and I think I saw Director Kroll as well. Oh, but we'll start with Director McMahon.
The shoulders to the bike lanes are, in my view, a separate issue, and it's an implementation issue on the part of the province, but why should we have to be asking for them to paint our lines? It just defies belief, doesn't it? But you're right, we need the lines regularly repainted, and it's not happening. And if we have to go through ABICC to do that, then I guess that's what we have to do, because it is a safety issue. You can't see where you're going at night.
Director Julia.
I just wanted to say, at least you guys get your lines painted. We don't. And I'd just like to add, I fully support my friend here to my right. I was as well driving through Cook Thomas Road, a.k.a. Egmont Road, and the lines were so bad, I was asking myself, who the heck is the director for this area? Why aren't these... But yes, the lines are very bad and at that end of the neck of our woods.
Sorry, Director Kroll?
I was just going to say, Director McMahon referenced MOTI's capacity, which seems to be somewhat lacking. We met with the minister, who fails to see we have a slug trail that they call a highway, and it's safe. I think it's well worth raising these issues, but I just feel like, we're sort of running up against a wall at about 70 miles an hour. It's frustrating. When you have the minister turn and tell us it's a safe highway, and we look at the little row of crosses along it, and no otherwise.
Okay, we don't want to get down too much of a rabbit hole with MODI. We have enough of one. Okay, so once again to the Corporate Officer, that was the list?
Thank you, Chair, yes.
Okay, So is everyone clear on the, and then, of course, if we have any other ones, we've got PCDC in January, so we still have lots of time, and thank you so much for bringing this to our attention early, so we're not trying to fit things in last minute. So everyone's clear on the items that we're putting forward to the corporate officer, and we'll receive a report back in January at PCDC. So if I move the recommendation and seconded, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So next, number 8 on our agenda is our CAO's report as of December 12th, 2019, pages 25A to D of our package. CAO Brown, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Pratt, for the opportunity. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the delay in putting it in the package, but I wanted to capture all the items to date that I could, given this will be my last report as your CAO.
I see pouty faces and then I see happy faces, so I don't know.
Mixed reviews. So this is my report since the October 24th report to the board. I'd like to just reiterate the CAO recruitment. And as known, the board has concluded the recruitment process for the new CAO. That was done back on November 5th. And it has been announced that Dean McKinley, who will be working here effective January 6, 2020. Mr. McKinley and myself have traded some information, and indeed will have a 2-week overlap throughout the first 2 weeks of January in order to provide for a smooth transition between the two respective CAOs. Another item I'd like to report on is a safety award, and we're rather proud of how we do safety here at the SCRD, and I'd like to announce that we've received the honorable mention for Regional Government Award for our efforts during the 2019 National Occupational Safety and Health Week, or NAOSH as we call it. The award was presented on November 28th, 2019 at the annual Safety Forum Awards dinner in Burnaby, BC.
So it was all the board, it was us, right? Yeah. Remember that? We did. Yeah.
That played a part of it, I'm sure.
That's not what they do, that's why the reason why we were only runner-ups. Honorable mention. We didn't win it.
So on behalf of Mr. Parker, who's away today attending a conference so we can win it again next year, I'd like to make a statement on his behalf. He said, "I'm so very proud of the team and the efforts put forward by this year's committee and really appreciate everyone's contributions and the support provided by the board, the senior leadership team, and all staff that participated. Congratulations to the committee and thanks for the support from everyone." Also like to please report on another award we received, and this is the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, or GFOA Award. It's been announced that the Sunshine Coast Regional District has received the GFOA's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for its 2019 to 2023 budget document. And a certificate of recognition for the budget presentation has been presented to the Corporate Services Department. And on behalf of Ms. Perot, or Tina, who's sitting beside me, this will be in a news release if it hasn't been already. She's made the following quote, which I'll state on her behalf. "Achievement of this award demonstrate the SCRD's commitment to high-quality financial reporting and transparency. A special thank you to our staff, which has shown their commitment in making sure that our residents are informed with quality financial documents." So, again, appreciation to those two members of our staff. Further to that, during my absence last week, there was a significant amount of work done on the budget as far as consideration by the board. And these are the budget proposals and service plans. And I'd sincerely like to thank, on behalf of Tina and myself, all the work done by staff and the board in considering reviewing the lengthy documents. I think it was very helpful to have all this comprehensive background information. There was significant work done by by the staff, not just at this table, but many staff throughout the regional district that helped advance all the budget items that were requested. And I think this was, from the feedback I received, it's enabled both the board to follow up with very pertinent questions, having all the base information, and made for more informed decision-making, I believe, by the board. So thank you again to everyone involved. Moving on with the report, the rest of the report I've structured with the CAO report is to report on the strategic plan and the various initiatives that both the board of directors and the staff and community is doing on behalf of the strategic plan and in its implementation. So, as we know, there's the 5 strategic focus areas, which is engagement and communications, infrastructure management, regional collaboration and partnerships, climate change and resiliency, and advocacy. So, first of all, with engagement and communications, I'd like to report on one of our managers of solid waste programs, Robin Cooper. She was invited to be presenter at the Tackling Plastics Business Forum. And this was an event hosted by community volunteers held at the Sunshine Coast Golf Course in Roberts Creek back on November 8th, 2019. This had a number of speakers, of which she was one of them. It was well attended by about 40 people, including with MLA Nicholas Simons. Director Julius was there as well, councillors from Gibson's and Seashelt planning staff, and a number of residents and businesses. Her presentation included the governance of solid waste, basically which levels of government can regulate businesses and/or the environment. She also talked about the SCRD solid waste services, including some rationale why businesses are not able to use the SCRD depots. Also a breakdown of the waste composition, what's in our garbage basically for 2014 and 2015, and that was surprisingly well received, is to know actually what's in the garbage. Talked about the board's advocacy for 2019 in this regard. Moving on to infrastructure management. Again, there's some more discussion that we had earlier today, but there's a lot of work being done in infrastructure services. And as we know, there's a significant amount of capital projects that are being contemplated. On the November 21st meeting, we had a presentation on the Raw Water Reservoir feasibility study, the groundwater investigation project update, as well as the strategic plan initiatives that are proposed by the Infrastructure Services Department. So the board, the staff, and consultants have accomplished a significant amount of work to date that is required to assess the various options for pursuing additional water supply for the coast. With regard to regional collaboration and partnerships, I continue to have my bi-weekly meetings with the other CAOs in the region to talk about various issues that we can collaborate on. One most recently talked about was snow clearing and ice control, so we're working on various options for that to coordinate resources. Another one we've been working on is following up on the Better Fields Committee. Staff, including Mr. Hall and myself, met with some of the users on November 12th, and we now plan on proposing a date on January 27th, location to be determined, and basically invite anyone that's involved in field maintenance and construction and financing. So we have the District of Seashelt involved, the Shell Nation, Town of Gibson's, ourselves, the SCRD staff, and School District number 46, the Better Fields Committee, as well as all other field group representatives. And we have a comprehensive list of people that do field bookings, and they'll be invited to the meeting as well, with a goal to look at who is best to coordinate the booking of the facilities, capital improvements for them, when they should be arrested, which ones are best suited for which activities, and so on. So I think it'll be a very worthwhile meeting to be held early in 2020. With regard to climate change and resilience, I'd reported that we would be attending a seminar. Some of the staff attended, along with Director Seekers was also there, and it was a local government seminar. One of the topics talked about the various local government powers as they pertain to climate change and adaptation. The areas covered included buildings, which was required to energy and GHG emissions, land use, transportation, procurement, as well as fleets and facilities. With regard to buildings, there was quite an emphasis on the new Province of BC STEP Code legislation that provides for the 5-step performance-based energy targets. And it was suggested during the presentation to look at requiring step 1 in the building bylaws as soon as possible. And this will be to familiarize builders with the performance pathway approach and transition to step 3 before the BC Code requires this by 2022. And there's also grant funding available from Hydro and Fortis BC to offset the costs of energy advisors, which are required as part of this implementation. With regard to land use and transportation, there was a number of initiatives there with regard to bylaws that can be adopted or policies. The one that was emphasized most was the regional growth strategy, which we're starting to embark on as a way to promote settlement that is socially, economically, environmentally healthy, and reduce urban sprawl, vehicle use, pollution protection, as well as protect water and environmentally sensitive areas. So there's a number of methods that were identified that we'll be looking at in the couple of years it's probably going to take to develop the regional growth strategy. So it will be an eye, of course, to greenhouse gas reduction. They also touched on procurement and fleets and facilities. This basically involved looking at social procurement policies, which we're doing, and of course the trend towards electrification of vehicles, and also looking at green or LEED buildings, LEED buildings. With regard to advocacy, there was a follow-up meeting we had earlier this week with Flynn Road, and as a follow-up to the meeting we had at UBCM. And it was excellently attended by the board as well as representatives through the provincial government and the First Nation. And we talked about the foundation agreement and implementation of the Pender Harbour Dock Management Plan. And there was lots of good dialogue on that, as well as information sharing on the provincial referral process, which was referred to in the earlier planning meeting we had today. This concludes my report regarding the activities from October 24th to December 12th, but I'd like to take this opportunity, as this will be my last monthly CA report. I'm going to read this verbatim because it's, I want to make sure I express all of this. I wish to convey how much I have thoroughly enjoyed working with everyone at the SCRD and the community as a whole. The original term was contemplated to be for a shorter time period than was actually transpired. However, the intention at the outset was for me to be your CAO in full, and not just be limited to act as if I were in an interim role. I am grateful for this, as it provided for an environment to effect change and improve communications and enhance relations. The dedication, commitment, professionalism, collegiality, and willingness to adapt in a fast-paced environment demonstrated and embraced by the directors and staff, as well as the other respective local governments and many community partners, was extraordinary. The appreciation expressed by the directors, I know, is genuine, and this sentiment has had a positive impact on the culture of this organization. This is truly a model of how people in local government can work together in a supportive manner to not only help each other complete our tasks, but also in the end serve the people in their respective communities throughout this Sunshine Coast Regional District. This team exemplifies how local government should conduct business, and to be a person to a person have embraced how regional governments can coordinate and collaborate on the coast. It's my heartfelt appreciation for being able to experience this wonderful opportunity. So thank you very much. So please answer any questions.
Okay, so before we go to questions, I would like, to put forward our appreciation so much for having you here and taking on this role and really embracing this role, embracing our team and our eclecticness as we are, quirkiness, et cetera. We are very sad to see you go, but so happy that you've taken the time to be with our organization. Your level of professionalism, your breadth of knowledge, and your calming influence has been very, very welcome into our organization. And we'll always be happy to have you back. And you will be very sorely missed. But we're looking forward to at least having you for another month and squeezing every bit of life we can out of you. Seeing as you did take off 2 weeks. No, just kidding. Pre-planned trip, I know. But I would just say, we have an amazing team, and we're so glad that you were able to be a part of that for as short-ish as the time as it was. And thank you so much. And with that, I'll open it up to any of the other directors if you have either questions or comments regarding the CAO's report. Director McMahon.
I just want to say, because I have been heard to gripe a bit about how many meetings we've been going to, but we've had a lot of meetings lately that I think have been very helpful. The meeting with Flimro, the Islands Trust meeting, I felt like we were, making some real progress. I am delighted to see all the field users getting together to talk about fields in a coast-wide prospect. And so this has been a really good experience. I think everybody here is happy. And the budget, there's a lot of pages, but there was really good information and there were really good discussions. And so, yeah, it's been great having you.
All right, Director Seegers?
Thank you. I think as a board, when we came in, up and down the coast, governments have said, we want to work together. And I think we've been attempting to do that, and we didn't always see it translate over to staff. And with you coming on board, you've actually led that and given staff permission that way to actually have that happen too. So we're hearing more and more. I mean, I hear at the District Sea Shield, I hear it here that, oh yeah, we're meeting with the other staff. And so there's a lot of collaboration going on. I think that it serves the community. There's one taxpayer here. So the more that we can work together and collaborate, everybody wins. So I thank you for showing that model to the staff.
Director Lee.
Well, we thank you a lot for what you've done. I'm not sure our new CO is going to, because you set an awful high bar for him. Poor guy. But I would like to say thank you for allowing us access to the staff and encouraging it. It's something we were missing, and it's something that's made it work a lot better for us. Today being a prime example. And I notice the staff are free to speak their mind now, and that is really great. We needed that. So thank you.
Well, and just to jump onto that one, having that very, with Mark, he and I have some pretty candid conversations, and that's one thing I've said for him the whole way along is the board wants to hear everything, and we've all been very clear in saying the same thing, is we need to hear everything, we want to hear everything. We might not be able to do everything, but we need to be able to hear that, and we need them to feel safe in saying that. So it's very much a two-way street, and poor Mark. The CAO is always that one right in the middle, right? I'm going to look around this side of the table. Mark Heltz.
I remember those interviews, and that you're not just an interim. You're going to set us up for success for the next CAO, and I think you really have done that. I might have been slightly skeptical of what you could do, but I'm totally impressed, and thankful. I really, it is sincere gratitude, and to the community, thank you.
Director Tice.
I'll echo what everybody else has said. Thank you very much.
Okay. So no actual questions for the reports, but lots of accolades. Yeah. Thank you so much for everything.
I said the part about us in the
the NAOSH
thing, and then Director Ties kind of said, yeah, that's probably why we didn't win, so.
The board is pulling you down. Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to move on to bylaws, and because we have no communications, we have no motions today, but we have bylaws. So we're going to start with Annex G, pages 26 to 28. First, may I have a motion to receive this report, please? So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. I'm going to look over to the corporate officer and see if there's anything that you wanted to say about this.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Okay, so before we go to first, second, third, and adoption at this meeting, I'm just going to look over to the electoral area director. No, sorry, what am I? I'm just going to look over to everyone and see if you had any questions on this report for the corporate officer before we go to our readings. Director McMahon?
I appreciate this. I am happy to see an end to a situation where people could be on the APC and never show up. So we had one person who didn't show up for, I think, 3 years, and that's silly.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask for first reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Advisory Planning Commission's Amendment Bylaw, number 453.6, 2019. So moved, seconded.
Okay. No, I can't move it.
Oh, no. It's, so it's electoral area directors.
Recommendation on page 26 first.
On page 26, we received, okay, I'm going to go to the corporate officer. Do we need to do the second recommendation there, or can we just go through the readings?
Thank you, Chair. You can just go through the readings.
Okay, so we're moving first reading at this time. So moved, seconded. My rural area directors, all those in favor? Motion carries. So we're now going to go to second reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Advisory Planning Commission's Amendment Bylaw number 453.6, 2019. So moved a second time. So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And for third reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Advisory Planning Commission's Amendment Bylaw number 453.6, 2019. So moved third reading and seconded twice. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. And may I have a motion to adopt the Sunshine Coast Regional District Zoning Advisory Planning Commission's Amendment Bylaw number 453.6, 2019. Move adoption. So moved. Seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, next we have Annex H, pages 29 to 32, the Sunshine Coast Regional District 2020 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw. May I ask for a motion to receive, please? So moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. I'm going to look over to our Chief Financial Officer, Perot, and to comment on this, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this particular bylaw is in order to sustain cash flow requirements for the regional district until we receive our majority of our tax funds in August. Just to note that for this year, we are proposing to increase the revenue anticipation amount as the budget has been slowly increasing over the years, and we haven't changed the revenue anticipation bylaw since 2010. So there's some rationale in the report there. I also just wanted to give a little bit of an indication. Last year, our revenue anticipation bylaw was for $8 million. We used up to $6.5 million, and that's just because staff do a considerable amount of work on a weekly basis for cash flow requirements. And so about $32,000 was actually incurred for borrowing costs. So right now, it's a floating rate of 2.465, and those rates are far lower than any other rate we can get just because of the Municipal Finance Authority. So if there's any other questions, happy to take them.
Okay, looking to directors, if you have any questions for our CFO, certainly Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. So 9 years is too long, kind of? Should be more of an annual thing? You look like 62%, kind of roughly 61 is a rule of thumb that you're applying, so should it be an annual thing?
Oh, so this particular bylaw is annual.
Increase.
I think we just really look at the cash requirements. So in past years, we've been able to sustain it because a lot of projects have been able to be funded in other ways. So this time, we are funding projects that are being funded either through reserves or taxation. So again, we are forecasting a greater need for this. And again, another part of this is that our reserves aren't fully committed. So at the end of the year, we usually have quite a large contribution to reserves. So we want to make sure we're fully subscribed. So there's timing, et cetera. So again, cash monitor it, and we don't usually enact it unless we really need it. But yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Director McMahon?
Yeah, I was just thinking this, as we move the budget process back so that it's on the calendar year, and we're starting projects earlier, then presumably that may have some impact on our cash flow. Is that the case?
It may, Chair. I mean, that's some of the things we'll have to monitor.
Okay. Director Seegers?
We've approved a lot of water projects that we want to move forward quickly. We need to have the money to do that.
Yep. All right. I'm going to look to any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we are looking for first, second, third reading and adoption at this meeting. It is another weighted vote, and the weighting schedule is right there. So I'm going to ask for a motion for first reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District 2020 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 723, 2019. So move first reading.
Lightweight motion here.
Lightweight?
I only have one vote.
Okay.
It's two. Yeah.
Got two.
Yeah, his is worth more than 20 seconds. Yeah.
So moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries. And for second reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District 2020 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 723, 2019. So moved second and seconded for second. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Now, for third reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District 2020 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 723, 2019. So moved third reading. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Are you in favor or opposed? Director Julius, you do get a vote on this? Okay. All right. Okay, so that passes. And we now have for adoption of Sunshine Coast Regional District 2020 Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 723, 2019. So moved adoption, please. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay, great. That moves us down to directors' reports. I'm going to offer it up to see who would like to go first. Okay, Director Toth.
Get it over with quickly. With all the meetings that I've had here this week and last week, I haven't actually been up to a whole lot much else. Had a really fun time ringing bells at the Salvation Army Kettle Campaign on Saturday, December 7th with alternate Director Rowe. I attended PMAC a couple days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, I don't even remember now, as an observer. There was an excellent synopsis provided to the committee by staff about sort of organizational structure covering solid waste, as well as potential timelines for programs in 2020 and 2021. District of Sechelt started budget discussions at Committee of the Whole yesterday. This week's meeting revolved around sewer services, including our 9 lift stations, our water resource center, and our Dusty Road septage receiving facility. It's been generally recognized that we've got a shortfall in the maintenance of the system, and that an increase in fees, including septage fees, is going to be necessary going forward. So similar discussion to what we were having here last week. So that's really all I've got to report.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And who would like to be next? Director Lee.
I'm ready. I've got it all written out. Did it a minute ago. I'd like everyone to know that earlier this month, Sechelt Nation Chief Warren Paul and Sechelt Nation Councillor Keith Julius and SCRD Director Keith Julius came up to Pender and had lunch with all the not-for-profit directors, and I got to tell you, a great time was had by all. It was a lot of fun. It was the Rotary Chamber Residents Association directors and the Rotary members. There was a lot of people in the room. It was a very interesting talk given by elected and hereditary Chief Paul, and there was lots of positive interaction with Keith and Warren, and we wouldn't let them go at the end after the meeting. We kept chatting with them, but Keith, he needed to go, so Warren bore the brunt. I think he was there for another hour. And the reason I'm mentioning this, just so I can make all you guys jealous, because, hey, we got the first meeting with them. It was really a good time, and it was very worthwhile. There was a wastewater asset plan meeting at the high school. I guess you guys all had yours, but we had quite a few people there. I'm not sure. It must have been 50 or more. Eh? How many? 30, 35? Yeah. I think Lori was there, and she's going to mention it as well, but I just got to say thank you to the staff. It was a great presentation. It was a difficult audience because, of course, Lee Bay was one of the larger wastewater plants, and they knew darn well what was coming, so they were loaded. But the staff sure did a great job handling it, and everybody was happy at the end, which was kind of surprising. So, and the staff tag teamed it. They did a great job. One would present, and when the going got a little bit tough, the other one would jump in, and very impressive. So thanks to the staff. Met with Mark and some representatives of FERA up at Pender, and of course we had breakfast, but that wasn't really why we met. And we talked about ocean and lake signage and signs, so I guess there'll be more coming on that for you guys to hear about, but strong desire in Egmont and Pender Harbor to get more ocean and lake access and more signage. You can tell people where they are in Pender, but it's a maze of roads and just about impossible to find, even after you described it to them. So we need some, I think they call it wayfaring signs, to get them to the places. And I got to thank Tina for I call it the big book, and it is sure a great thing, and especially this time of the year, I keep looking it up and using it. There's just about everything there. But of course, like usual, I got some more suggestions so we can make it bigger and better. And I wanted to mention the FLINRO meeting. The resolution I was mentioning earlier is SR1. It was the very first one we dealt with at UBCM. And the foundation agreement is definitely one aspect of it. There's more to it than that. If we think back, it's all about Crown land use, and our involvement in the planning portion of Crown land use. And the fact that we're an order of government, that we're not a stakeholder. We're an order of government, and we need to be involved as an order of government. And I thought that the meeting we had was absolutely excellent. It was with the Sechelt Nation there, and the FLINRO, and the SCRD, and I thought we covered a lot of good ground and made a lot of progress. So I would like to hope that it's a joint meeting, and we're going to get a repeat of it, because we got a lot of subjects to discuss. And that's it. That's my report.
Okay, thank you, Director Lee. And I saw Director Ties' hand up as well.
Sure. Somehow I always come way down the list on the director's reports, which usually is absolutely not a problem with me. So I thought I'd jump to the early part of the queue this time. Since our last board meeting on November 27th, I looked it up, and I think there's been 2 days where I haven't had to be here. So it's been busy. And the budget round one was a big reason. I'm currently putting together a newsletter that's has a lot to do about why our infrastructure costs are going up, and that there's three reasons for it: asset management, infrastructure expansion, and the borrowing to install those water meters. So, and putting some context into all that so that people aren't going to be shocked as to when it happens to them. So that's certainly something that I'm doing right now. I really appreciated the meeting with Flinro. It was nice to get some clarification as to where in the process they are, where they're headed, and how the joint decision-making working group works. So that was that was very, very much appreciated for sure. I was also the Roberts Creek co-housing was the guinea pig for the waste treatment presentation, and Kyle and his team, everybody did a really good job telling everybody how things might go. Some of the key findings that, or the key takeaways for me were that if you when you're on your own private property and you have your own septic field, you generally don't give it another thought unless it's not working. And then you end up spending a whole lot of money getting it fixed. So to establish reserves, capital reserves for the replacement of a field is not something that you do when you're on your own, but when you're doing when you're dealing with these communal fields, it certainly is a wise thing to do, and the reason is that ultimately the value of your home could drop considerably if those capital reserves weren't in place, and that brings back the importance that realtors really need to disclose the condition of the septic field, the age of the septic field, and expected lifespans. I never knew that a septic field had a finite lifespan of blah blah blah. The pipes are meant to last 80 years, and so that's the kind of stuff that realtors need to disclose. Otherwise, they could be held liable. So that was an interesting takeaway for sure. And then the other thing was that because the flows in co-housing are so low, the co-housing is designed for a flow rate of 51 cubic meters, yet they're using on average 8, which is less than the 22.7 that we need for certification. Or that we need for us to take it over. So changing certification from a Class B treatment facility to a Class C or even to a VCH one was something that was discussed, and if I was living in co-housing and running the show, I might seriously consider that, but they seem to be a bit more conservative in their outlook. And so I think the key takeaway there is that every community needs to make their own decision as to what they want to do going forward, and I'm certainly not going to impose my views on them. But it's certainly it was an interesting process and a worthwhile meeting to be at for sure. I really recommend seeing how everybody else is making up their minds about how that all ends up working out for everybody. That being said, I think there's some, especially co-housing, which is meant to be an affordable housing type, there's going to be some really hard discussions with some of the people that live there, and they might not be able to there's some artist families, there's some people that live paycheck to paycheck that can just barely make ends meet living in co-housing, and they might have a hard time looking at those increases because they're considerable. So that's it for me, and thank you, CAO, again for everything, and then, I wish everybody a happy holidays.
Thank you, Director Tice. Director Kroll.
Thank you. On the 21st of November, we facilitated an accessibility dialogue session in Gibsons. It was funded by Spark. I discovered something very interesting. Don't try and schedule something like that at night. It just is impossible for people with any sort of accessibility issues to get out to. I later attended on the 25th of November, and Mayor Seegers was there. A similar session hosted at the Seaside Centre in Gibsons. It was Seashelt, sorry. It was facilitated by April Struthers, and she did it on behalf of the library, and it was an excellent experience. The whole background behind it was to provide guidance to the provincial government for drawing up accessibility legislation, which, I think is really important. As people governing, we should be looking at accessibility, everything through the eye of accessibility. It affects us. It was a staggering figure, 926,000 people in the province of BC have accessibility issues. It's like 1 in 4. It's staggering. And some of them you don't see. There's all sorts of issues. I don't know if you've noticed, some of the grocery stores are now offering shopping hours with reduced lighting and no music playing, just to help people deal with an everyday thing, but they have a problem with it because of issues they have. So that was really great. Donna Thomas, I would like to thank. She did an amazing Remembrance Day service for the National Day of Remembrance, December 6th. It was a very moving ceremony, and I really would like to commend Donna for organizing it. She had some sponsorship, but it was a very moving service, and I felt very privileged being able to attend. I really... Well, you were highly visible as the driving force behind it. Donna made a presentation to Gibsons Council, and Mayor Beamish and I attended, and it was really great. Something else I would like to mention, December 5th, all the first responders on the Sunshine Coast from Egmont to Gibsons got out for a campaign for the Elves Club, and it was really quite impressive. This year, $26,005.97 was raised. In the Gibsons Fire Department, they went from 10 till 4 because they waited for another ferry sailing, because they didn't want to miss out on an opportunity of shaking people for money. But it really, it was a very gratifying experience. It was to support the Elves Club, and people donating. They'd pull up in a car, and you really sort of thought, are they going to be able to donate? And these are people themselves who had been beneficiaries of the work of the Elves Club. And, it's just amazing, the giving community. Gibsons Fire Department alone raised $15,001.83. It's a staggering amount. The Pender Harbor Search and Rescue Station and the fire department got together. Seashelt Fire Department made a donation. Roberts Creek Fire Department combined with Lansar, and it was just a really great coastwide effort to be supportive, and I was very proud to be part of it. And that's about it for now.
I'm going to look for the next volunteer who hasn't gone yet. Director Hiltz. Yeah.
I'm
I
just
have like a
gonna,
light that's going on and off above my head. Okay.
I'll just talk about one thing, and it's something that I had to put my gum boots on to get done. As everyone knows, that the drainage issues in the Grantham's Landing area, drainage starts at the top of the hill. And talking with a couple of residents, what seems to have happened now is that because we don't have drainage management, people have figured it out on their own. So what they do is everyone does it on their own. So people are treating water as a waste product at this time of year, and they want to just pass it on to their neighbors. So there has been no history of impromptu ditching, culverts, passing on water downstream. Eventually this ends up down in Soames Creek or at the bottom of Harvey Road into people's living rooms. So it seems to be an area where we have influence and information about how to help people learn to deal with water on site. The Good Neighbor guidelines that we have for the regional district, it doesn't talk about stormwater. Good neighbors are about managing it on site and not passing it off to your neighbor and letting them deal with it. So that's the observation that is happening is in light. If MODI doesn't enforce what water comes off of private property into their ditches, which is to maintain roads, not as a drainage, not a diking function, it's not a drainage function, people make it up on their own. And we seem to have definitely hit a threshold where people are finding that the volumes of water passed from one property to another, this is a civil matter between properties, is resulting in everyone just wanting to get rid of it, and it ends up down the hill. And we got a Grantham's Well, Church Road. This is where the water stops at the top. It roughly starts at the top of the bypass. So it's an observation that this is a way we have influence and information, but we don't have a lot of control over this. So it's a time to really, and these are the ALR lands typically, and people are having difficulty growing crops because of inundation of the water during the wintertime. They love it in the summertime, but they don't know how to find this balance, and you need cooperation among the neighbors, and the neighbors are not able to find it because everyone's doing it on their own. And I equate this with what we did with solid waste. Before we had a landfill, everyone managed their own waste. They burnt it, they buried it, they shipped it out into the ocean, and I think this is the transition we're going through, is that water is a resource. It's not a waste product, and so somehow we got to shift this mindset, because it's long-standing, but we're definitely hitting the threshold where it's becoming problematic for people and causing property damage and is affecting their ability to enjoy their property. So, yeah, I'm looking at it as this is the shift we got to make. Water is a resource. It's not a waste product. And so that's my only kind of comment from what's happening in the West Howe Sound area. So.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
And I will just add to what Director Hilt said, is that at present, the only recourse that residents have for this kind of overland flooding is to sue each other, and that is not helpful. This is not the road we need to go down. I've been busy. I saw half of the film The Human Scale in celebration of Planning Week on November 29th. I hope the other half was good too, but I was trying to be in two places at once, which is what I do most of the time. Budget week was intense, exhausting, but really interesting process. Really appreciated it. December the 5th, I was at the LEAP, Local Entrepreneur Accelerator Program celebration. They had 9 entrepreneurs graduate the course this year. A couple of interesting ones, a fellow who is interested in passive house design and retrofitting, so that we need that around here. And another who wants to start a zero-waste grocery store in Sechelt. So, yeah. Excellent. December 7th, I attended the Wood Creek Park Neighborhood Association Christmas get-together, where there was festive food and a lot of discussion about sewage. December the 9th, we had the Fleming meeting here, and I also was at the Gibson's Library Board. December 10th, of course, was PMAC. December 11th, we had that Old Growth Consultation Conference call here, and I went out in the evening with the gals from the Self-Employed Women's Network. But I actually wanted to talk a little bit about my role. I've been going over to the AVICC climate leadership meetings in Nanaimo. I emailed out to all the directors the Vision Vision material. The co-chairs of this group are the mayors of Victoria, Tofino, and Duncan. Participation is politicians from assorted regional districts, municipalities, and the Islands Trust, a few staff, and a contingent from the University of Victoria. First Nations are invited, but not at present participating. It's always a capacity issue. Mayor Lisa Helps has put in a request to the federal government to fund our work, and we all have our fingers crossed. The goal is to create scalable solutions for our local governments to address climate change mitigation and adaptation. It's the elephant in the room all the time. We joke about moving at the speed of government, but it's actually no joke, because the speed of climate change is moving at a terrifying pace. Neither is the phrase "a world of trouble." I mean, there's the absolute truth. I mean, if anybody's been watching the news reports from Sydney, Australia, pretty damn scary. Greta Thunberg is Time Magazine's Person of the Year, and she is saying our house is on fire, and we are moving at the speed of government. And I cannot, it is really difficult to try and deal with, I gotta say. The latest report I read is that climate system researcher Tim Lenton from the University of Exeter in the UK, his team have been researching tipping points of irreversible change in the world's climate systems. And what the international team found out was that the tipping points that they assumed were low probability and might only be dangerous if global temperatures rose 5 degrees above pre-industrial levels are in fact becoming exceeded at increases of 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. And so we know we are in a world of trouble, and we need to figure out how to respond, because the Local Government Act was not written to deal with this. Nothing in our processes and procedures, nothing in the way that we do things, our own investments in our own lives, we still aren't ready for this, and we need to figure out how to be ready. So that's where I hope we will be having some really good discussions in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Director Julius, do you have anything that you'd like to report from the Seychelles Nation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I attended a plastics meeting. I forgot the date and time of the meeting, but it was a very interesting. I never knew things were so bad out there when it comes to plastics. Some of the things they had shown when they gutted open that whale, and there were 7 kilos of plastic in the whale. They opened up a blue heron, and the same thing, plastics in the blue heron, penguins, and then even after the mother penguin eats the plastic, then she's got to feed her young, and she's vomiting the food up and into the young one. Just recently, they found a dead deer on the Sunshine Coast. They opened up the deer, and the same thing inside the deer were plastics. They talk about that big warm blob that's just outside of Vancouver Island. There was a report of the sighting of a great white shark in the Juan de Fuca Straits, and they believe that was part of that blob that sits out in the water there. So when it comes to plastics, things are really bad out there, and again, I didn't know they were that bad. So it's something that's really bothers me. All of the wildlife that is affected out there by that. By the plastics, and we all know where that comes from. It comes from us, and so we really need to do something to help and do anything that we can. I always see that thing on TV where they say by 2050 there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than there is fish. So that is something that's very, very scary to me. I keep in close contact with our RKey team. One of the finds that we've just had recently is there's a development that's just taken place behind the food bank in Sechelt. And in that area, they pulled out 2,200 pieces of artifacts out of this site. So if you extrapolate that, it's probably about a half a hectare in size. So if you extrapolate that throughout the whole district of Sechelt, just imagine how much history we have lost with the development of the district of Sechelt. And there are things that are going out there that are preventing us from collecting as much as we can of our history. We've already lost a lot. If you see the logging, the housing developments, everywhere within my swear, we have lost so much of our history. Even I attended a archaeologist forum, and they themselves were saying, because of everything they found to date is probably less than 1% of what was truly out there. And we have found quite a bit of my history. And there are some things that are preventing us from finding even more. There are some governments out there where they're putting in place where they're saying things like, if there isn't a cultural site within 100 meters of where they want to develop, then an archaeology assessment or anything doesn't need to be done, which is, in my mind, a very bad thing. And I hope some of those governments, change their ways, and, because wherever there's development, if we're going to disturb land, then for the sake of our history, the Sechelt people, I hope RKey assessments will be done regardless of where and when a disturbance is going to take place, because we're just there's just so much that we're losing when it comes to that. So we just hope that we can make some changes when it comes to that, because I want every inch of the land how to look at whenever there's a disturbance to the land. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Julius. Director Seegers.
It's only 8 days till I get to go away. Not that I'm counting. What have I got up to since the last board meeting? I want to thank the planners on the Sunshine Coast for putting on the World Town Planning Day. It was great to actually see them all together as well. We tend to see them individually, but this was an opportunity for them to get together and relate to each other, so it was great to see that. On the 30th, the District of Sechelt had the Light the Lights event. That's always great with the lights coming up in Rockwood and down the street. Kids count it down. And then we had the parade, the Festival of Lights. There were 30 different entries this year. Is it 30 entries? Sounds right. I think, yeah. And it's amazing. It's grown every year. So we have probably not as many people yet as Canada Day, but every year it grows and grows and grows. So probably 3 or 4 deep all down the streets in Sechelt. It's phenomenal. It's just a great event. This is when we have the things like the cement trucks and the graders and the excavators all covered up with lights. Director Tom Lamb was here. His son actually, last 2 years in a row now, has won for Best Decorated Float. He had his big truck, and then he had a huge trailer on the back, and he had reindeer with a sleigh at the back, all decorated up, and Tom Lamb and a couple of his family members were sitting in the sleigh up back. So it's great. He wasn't there handing stuff out with us, but he was riding the float. That night was also the Black Boot event in the District of Sechelt. This is the event that's taken over from Ruby Slipper Fund. So it was set up by a group of women here on the Sunshine Coast. One of their members dealt with cancer and found that there were a lot of expenses that weren't necessarily covered off by the health care system, and they needed some additional funds. So they started up this fund, this was her request, they start up this Ruby Slipper Fund to support others on the Sunshine Coast who are dealing with cancer. There is an application process for funding if you need, but it's anything, funding for groceries or bus passes or whatever. They haven't turned anybody down ever. They want to get the information out. It's online application. Black Boot started up following Ruby Slipper from a couple of gentlemen here on the Sunshine Coast who themselves had cancer and said, why is it just women? And so for the last few years, I don't remember how many years it is, maybe 4 now, 4 or 5, somewhere in there, they do an event at the end of November each year, and they've been holding it in the Legion. They have 2 bands, one on each side, and they do a huge silent auction as well. And they raise a lot of money for that, for cancer support of people on the Sunshine Coast. They don't know what they're going to do now that the Legion is going to be closing soon, so we'll see what they come up with next year. On the 1st, I attended the Seaforth Highlanders annual Ortona dinner. Well, I didn't know what an Ortona dinner was, so I did some research. So if you're ever interested, check out Ortona, Italy, and the Seaforth Highlanders. The Seaforth Highlanders were invited in or took over from the British when the British were trying to move up through Italy, and the Seaforth Highlanders showed what they were made of for Canada. Check it out, a great story. There's some other stuff behind that. What else? A number of us attended the West Sea Shout Elementary School announcement for the expansion. That's great news. Then on Tuesday, while here you were talking about transit, I was in Burnaby. Yes, I was in Burnaby with the Mayor's Forum with the RCMP. So there is a group of the mayors from Area E who get together on our time to look at issues with the RCMP. One of the things that came out of that was the RCMP they are looking to unionize. The union has now been ratified. They have never had an agreement though before. Like they've never had a union, so they've never had an agreement. So they're starting now on the agreement, and they're starting with very basic things like who's in the union and who isn't in the union. What are the terms of work going to be like, etc. But one of the things they indicated was that in past, the RCMP were considered the top police force in the country for pay, for quality of work environment, etc. Over the years, they've really dropped. They're about 60th now in Canada, so that's quite low. That has implications for things like recruitment. One of the members there indicated that there was a transit. I forget where it was, but one of the transit cops were hired, and they were getting paid way more than the RCMP. So when you're in that kind of competitive environment, you just don't get the people coming forward. So there's going to be all that kind of stuff. So looking at what is the impact going to be on our budgets going forward? There will be an impact. What else came out of that? I think that was probably the biggest one. Just keep track of that. They're putting information out publicly, so keep track of that, and we'll be seeing the impacts of that. Budget as well, as everybody else talked about here. But on top of budget, we also had District of Sea Shout, public hearing and a regular council meeting. And then Chair Pratt and I and Mayor Beamish were on TV and Eastlink Community TV. And what else? Tuesday, I attended the Vital Signs Workshop put on by Community Foundation. They have put out their 2019 Vital Signs report, and there's some disturbing information in there. I won't go into details. Things like food bank use has gone up, a lot of things we've heard about. Check it out, it is online, it's available to everybody. What they are doing though is they have identified 3 areas that they want to particularly focus on. So in past years, they've had about $80,000 that they get to decide who gets what money, and they've had a limit of $7,500 on those small grants. what they've decided to do this year is split it into two groups. One would be the 40,000, which would still go out as a $7,500 grants. But then they've got another 40,000, and they're going to focus on three areas: housing, affordable housing, food security, and I forget the third one. But what they were looking at doing with this workshop is trying to have people get together and collaborate on how to, those mental health and addictions. How to collaborate together and come forward and request these funds. And they could potentially be giving $40,000 to one group. So this was a way to introduce this to the community, and they'll be looking at applications in February to give out that money. What else? Kettle campaign, took part in that yesterday. It was a lot of fun. I always have a lot of fun just wishing people a happy birthday. And I'm looking forward to the board and staff jolly potluck tomorrow. I think there's lots more, but that's it. Good.
Okay, so I'll be as brief as possible because I was at many of these other things that everyone else was at. This week, a couple of events were the Connor Park and Welcome Woods consultation, and then last night's Area A wastewater information session. And I wanted to comment on both of these because I was so incredibly impressed by our staff and our staff presentation and our staff handling of the events. And I just wanted to say that very publicly, along with, and I'm going to pull in the budget piece too, because you've done very well at preparing the board for everything coming in, and the communication out into the community has been fantastic. And both sessions I was at between the consultation that was held in Half Moon Bay, and then the Area A wastewater, very, very well handled by the staff members that were handling each one of those. And I just wanted to just say my gratitude to you for that, and thank you so much for doing that. Very well informed, very well run, and tough questions in both of the sessions that I was at, and when you have a lot of community experts who know the history of how things happen, it's staff can get put on, and relatively new staff, because I mean Kyle 2.5 months and he did very, very well, and Rebecca did fantastic, and so it's just amazing work. So thank you so much for that, and then to reiterate on the budget piece again, just so impressed by the level of information that you're giving us, and making sure that we've been properly prepped, because we know there are a lot of things that are coming down, and we appreciate that. So thank you. Last week I had my lowest attendance ever at a community dialogue session. I had 3 residents, which was great. I got actually a note later from another community member saying, wow, you must be doing a good job because nobody's showing up. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll take it. So I'll be continuing those in the new year, and we'll see how they go. A couple of things that are coming up. I'm looking forward to the potluck tomorrow. Probably bring something sugary, because it seems that's just what I do. So, and then on Saturday is Breakfast with Santa at Half Moon Bay Elementary, and I'm there to clear dishes and serve tables, and I'm sure take questions on things. And then another really important thing that's coming up next Monday on December the 16th is the elected women across the coast are getting together for dinner, and I'm really looking forward to that. And we'll also, we've invited the Islands Trust, we've invited the the student counselors and student trustee, along with our MLA's constituency assistant and our MP's constituency assistant, and it's just a great chance for us to get together and support each other as elected women on the Sunshine Coast, and because we have hit that 50% threshold, and I'm going to constantly say congratulations to us on that. So, but with that, that's really all I have from my report, and thank you to all the other directors for their reports, and I hope everybody has a happy holiday season. We have what's that?
8 days.
8 days, sorry. Darnelda is not counting down. I'm looking forward to actually seeing my children in person, so that's going to be fun. And we have one item of new business that we added on at the beginning of the meeting, and that was core business priorities. And I'm going to look over to Director McMahon to introduce this, please.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to do this to us late in the afternoon. We'll be looking for a little direction. But as we know, we are facing hard budget choices. I don't expect they're going to get any easier over the course of time. And apparently the SCOD has never actually looked at prioritizing any services over other services. And so I would like us to start thinking about whether that is something that we would want to do. Probably not this budget round because it's already underway, but in the future. Because basically we are spending about half of our budget on what I would call essential services. That would be water and wastewater, solid waste, emergency and fire departments, rural planning, because we're required to do that, and then the general government services that support all of those. And that together is about 50% of our budget. And in many cases, those things are pretty easy to establish a level of service. Like with the fire departments, if they need a new fire truck, they do, because there's rules and there's stuff, and there's rules about training, there's requirements, legislative requirements, all of those things. You know, whether people get water when they turn on their taps, that's easy to measure. But then we get into a lot of services that the SCOD has taken on over the years. And some of them are very important, too. I mean, transit is important. And ports are important. And then we get into recreation and parks. And everything is nice to have. Everything is important to a degree, but especially when we get into recreation and parks, we never had the conversation about what level of service this organization wishes to deliver. Just as one example, the SCOD runs some community halls. Some of them we own and operate. I think there's at least one we own but don't operate. And then there are lots of other community halls that are independently operated by other groups. And to my knowledge, there has never been a discussion, do we want to be in the business of running community halls? Is this what the SCOD does? And if so, how do we do it? We're facing some pretty big bills for some rebuilds of community halls. I mean, this is all part of, I think, a discussion about what is our core business, and when push comes to shove, what do we prioritize? So I'm not quite sure how to move that one forward. I'm looking over to the chair with her bright ideas here.
Okay.
Or we could look over to our chief magician over there.
Director Seegers is going to comment first.
So I think that legislatively there are required services that the regional district needs to provide. So what probably we could start with the conversation is, what are we required to provide? And then what are the other services that over time we've taken on, either because the community's requested us to do that or whatever. But if we even just started at that point, that would be give us the baseline to start looking at the conversation.
Director Ties?
I think Director McMahon brings up a good point, and generally, reductions in service have only occurred once people start parading with signs outside the front doors, and it'd be good to kind of nip that in the butt rather than having that happen. I know in Europe, in certain areas, some communities have chosen to close down their one and only pool, and yet we have 3 of them. And so there's definitely a conversation to be had about, especially with climate change and the costs of that coming towards us. And in the end, the provincial and federal government, that still is all funded by us. And we're not the only community that has to grapple with climate change. So it's I think this is definitely a good conversation to have, to take a look at those hard decisions that might have to be made in the future, and just seeing what's lowest on the, or what's the first thing on the chopping block if push comes to shove.
I'm going to look over to staff now that we've entered into this realm of conversation, and see if you have any magic over there for how to move this forward.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Certainly introduce the topic and ask my managers here, general managers, to chime in as well. It's certainly a discussion we've had at this table when developing the budget proposals that have come forward, is that in a lot of areas there is no established service levels, particularly some of the ones articulated already by directors, including hours of operation of recreation facilities, for example, or a level of maintenance for fields, all those types of things. So that certainly is something that affects the budget. And to date, there's a number of areas where there is no clear direction as far as an established, effective, acceptable level of service in quite a few areas of the budget. So it's not an easy task to do. It's very comprehensive and would have to be done over a long period of time, and perhaps could be done in a logical manner with a few services at a time, rather than try and do it all at once. But with that, I could defer to Ms. Pro, and she certainly has brought that to my attention.
Yeah, I think one of the key tools in doing this for local governments especially is the term we use for asset management planning. But again, that's one of the tools in the toolbox. I think one of the challenges sometimes with asset management planning is they don't always focus on those softer services that deliver programs. So recreation facilities, that would be a different endeavor. We've already started sort of the asset component to maintain, but we haven't married the service level discussion about, how many programs deliver hours of operation, as CEO Mark Brown already indicated. So I think this is where we're already starting on this work. So part of the discussion with the wastewaters is you are indirectly having a service level discussion right now. You're engaging your public and you're doing that. So this is where you're going to start to have that with the North, South, and Regional Water Service. Even though they're required, you still need to make service level decisions. Where we internally are focusing on the core services for those plans right now, so things where you have to deliver services. Solid waste is a different discussion, but you've already made resolutions to look at those. And so we are systematically rolling through that. And in order to do that well and in an informed manner, you do need all of the information gathered. You can do it at a high level, and we have done that in the past for some services indirectly. But again, if the board so wishes for us to focus on some, or to narrow it down, or to articulate some of the key services we deliver, because we have over 100 functions in the regional district, but we probably deliver about 45 to 50 key services. So that's a lot. And again, comparing ourselves to other regional districts, we're probably delivering a lot of services that other regional districts are not doing. So most certainly, ongoing discussions can be had on that.
Director McMahon?
And I do appreciate that the budget proposals that we've received are clearly, really core things that we need to be doing. I get that and I appreciate it. So maybe a place that we could start would be at a future time, possibly after we put this budget to bed, that we get a report from staff that tells us what are our key legislated services that we must deliver, because that would at least be a place to start in understanding all of this. It is a hugely complicated picture, and of course it has been exacerbated, as I've said before, by downloading from government. Ports is a wonderful example of something that was downloaded. So there's always temptation to expand our services to meet real needs in the community, except that we can't do everything. So it's a really hard discussion. So perhaps I could move that we have a staff report on this topic to come to a future corporate services or corporate services committee.
Okay. Does that work and seconded? Okay, and staff, that's sufficient enough direction? Okay, great. Any further discussion on this item? Director Hiltz.
Like Director Lee over there, that it's called round one tax implication, where you have the table, the function. It is really gold, right? And in the about of each one of those, it just says whether it's internal recovery or taxation, but it doesn't say whether it's a key required service. So that might be a place just to start to, because when I go through that list, the majority of those things are optional services that the community, and I don't think the community understands that most of the services are optional. So whether that's a place to kind of start to tuck that stuff.
I'm going to go to our CFO.
I think in order for staff to determine that, the board would have to decide what you deem critical, because per the Local Government Act, there's only 3 services that a regional district is required to do, and that is solid waste management, emergency planning, and liquid waste management. So those are the only ones in the Local Government Act that no, that would be considered a local service area. And, so that's where you'd want to create some, so there, in creating this, so in creating this report, I mean, there's a lot of nuance to it. So for us, I mean, obviously you're going to create it, but in other jurisdictions, that service might be delivered in different ways. So that's, I think, part of these intricacies that the board would have to decide what you deem as critical services.
Great, thank you. That's, yeah. There is a motion on the floor. Director Lee, to the motion on the floor about getting a staff report regarding service level.
Well, I was going to comment, yes, it's a great idea, and I think that's, you got to start with your manpower plan and what your people are doing, because that's where your funding is going to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the whole picture as well. If we can get a really good handle on the budget, if we really truly understand it and we have a complete handle on it, it's a good starting point, because at least we know where our money's going. And so it's a pretty good starting point. But I'm all in favor of this. This is a great idea.
Excellent. Okay, any further discussion on this item on the floor? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Great, okay. Now, we are going to be going in camera, so I'm going to ask for a motion to, that the public be excluded, and then we'll have an opportunity for any questions from public and media. So may I have a motion that the public be excluded in attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91A, C, E, G, K, and 2B of the Community Charter? So moved, seconded, all those in favor, motion carries. Okay. And questions from our public or our media? No? Nothing from Sophie? Okay. Donna?